This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to the Political Review. This is our first show for the last month of 2022. Getting a lot of feedback of my voice on the air. Not sure what that is. So I'm trusting and hoping that this week has been a good one for you. And I pray that all of my listeners are experiencing their best lives. And hopefully you go into the Christmas season joyful. And if not joyful, then thankful, at least. We are grateful for all of the many blessings that God has given us. And even those among my friends and listeners who are agnostic or atheist, even if you don't believe in God, you still benefit from his many blessings. And for that, even if you're not, I'm very thankful. So this year has been a deep one. Many, many interesting things have happened. And, as we've covered here on the Political Review, the political arena has been a very interesting place in this calendar year. It's been the government has had an interesting time dealing with the aftermath of a landslide election and a landslide election result and the lingering effects of a global health pandemic, and also the lingering effects of Dorian, which were compounded in some ways by Isaias, and which also came on top of Michael and Joaquin, and it's been a rough go for the Davis administration in their first year. And then, of course, the most recent, I guess you would call, let's just call it a occurrence. I don't want to characterize it one way or the other, is the collapse of FTX, which was something that the Davis administration they bragged about it as, I guess, proof of concept for the reissued DARE Act, the amended DARE Act, and the fallout from the collapse of FTX continues. And so, of course, that is, I guess, the first story that we'll start with this week in the Political Review. And for our friends in Freeport who are listening, I see you. Thank you. You're awesome. Prime Minister Philip Davis this week said that he'd been informed that the embattled former CEO of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, has been interviewed by local authorities as investigations continue into the collapse of the crypto giant. The Prime Minister also told reporters that he was not concerned that FTX's collapse would negatively impact the country's real estate market. And we'll talk a little bit more about the real estate market when we go under the radar in that section of the show later. But the Prime Minister's statements come after Bankman-Fried gave a nearly hour-long interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin this last week at the Deal Book Summit in New York City. Bankman-Fried gave that interview at the summit via a video call from here in the Bahamas, where he sort of, I guess you could say he opened up about about FTX's downfall, and also about his own transgressions that led to it. He also recently sat down with ABC News for his first network interview since the swift collapse of his company, where he denied having knowledge of any quote-unquote improper use of customer funds. That interview also took place in the Bahamas and was aired on the station, that would be ABC, late this week. So when asked if he was worried about going to jail, Bankman-Fried said, and I'm going to quote him here, "There are a lot of things that are worrying me right now, possible. I'm trying to focus on what I can do going forward to be helpful, and that whatever regulatory and legal processes that are happening play out as they will." As time passes, more details about the collapse of FTX have emerged. And here we'll talk about some of those details right now. So FTX's swift demise, came after CoinDesk, a publication which reports on cryptocurrency, broke the news in early November. I mean, we're talking about less than a month ago, folks. In early November, about a leaked document that appeared to show that Alameda Research, Bankman-Fried's cryptocurrency trading firm, held an unusually large amount of FTT tokens. Now, FTT tokens were created by FTX. Days later, Binance, a cryptocurrency exchange considered a major rival to FTX, announced that it was selling all remaining FTT tokens, which then led to a large number of clients simultaneous withdrawing of their assets from FTX. After facing a liquidity crisis, FTX, Alameda Research, and dozens of other affiliated companies all filed a bankruptcy petition in Delaware. And we talked all about that and the local bankruptcy proceeding last week. The firm's collapse is currently being investigated by Bahamian and international law agencies who are particularly looking at the handling of FTX's customers' funds. In addressing the downfall, Bankman-Fried told ABC News that part of the problem was, quote, just literal distraction, unquote. He said he ought to have ensured that he didn't lose track of the most important things in the company, something that he had admitted he did a pretty incomplete job of doing. Bankman-Fried also admitted to not spending any effort on risk management, noting that that was obviously a mistake and saying that he had gotten cocky. FTX Digital Markets, which is headquartered in the Bahamas, is the Bahamian subsidiary of FTX Trading Limited, which is owner and operator of FTX, which is in fact a cryptocurrency exchange. FTX Digital Markets was incorporated in the Bahamas in July of 2021 and has since injected millions of dollars into the Bahamian economy, mainly through real estate. Again, keep in mind, we're going to be talking about real estate a little later. Last month, the Bahamas Securities Commission took action to freeze the assets of FTX Digital Markets and related parties and placed those assets into placed the company into provisional liquidation. The commission also suspended FTX's registration and applied for the appointment of provisional liquidators of FTX. Bankman-Fried has already said he expects to be left with nothing after the dust settles, noting that he currently has only $100,000 in his bank account. Of course, before I continue with the story, I have to ask, in what world is a six-figure bank account balance, quote unquote, nothing? I mean, talk about rich people problems, eh? Anyway, on with the story. Among his final acts as FTX CEO, Bankman-Fried filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the US on November 11th. And as we noted last week, FTX Trading's new CEO, John Ray III, has asserted in court documents that FTX has, quote, credible evidence the Bahamian government is responsible for directing unauthorized assets to the debtors' systems for the purpose of obtaining digital assets of the debtors. That took place after the commencement of the Delaware bankruptcy protection filing. Now, the Bahamas Securities Commission has called these comments a misrepresentation of what happened. And as we laid out the timeline last week, it would seem that that is in fact the case. The commission said that it had acted in accordance with a court order to transfer all digital assets of FTX into a digital wallet controlled by the commission for quote unquote safekeeping. But the truth is that since the fall of FTX, the Bahamas has taken a hit to its reputation. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal last week, Bruce Zagaris, an attorney who's worked on Caribbean financial matters and international white-collar crime, said that the fact that the Bahamas has attracted the number 3 digital exchange and it quickly went from success to bankruptcy has jeopardized the new product and the new innovation that the Bahamas has undertaken. In an interview with CoinDesk, also last week, Commissioner of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, Kristen Johnson, by U.S. President Joe Biden and confirmed by the Senate, said, and I quote, I'm just going to annoy you, but listen to the quote. If FTX had been a regulated entity under our regulatory umbrella, that is the U.S. regulatory umbrella, customer bonds would have been protected. There would have been liquidity reserve requirements in place, and there would have been monitoring and surveillance that is not immediately available. Now, in his nationally televised address on this issue, our Attorney General, Ryan Pinder, stressed that the Securities Commission of the Bahamas acted swiftly to wind up FTX. Pinder pointed out that the commission was the first regulator in the world to take significant steps with respect to the FTX group of companies, which has operations and regulated activities throughout the world. He asserted that this had been done for the purpose of protecting the interests of FTX's customers and creditors, as well as the integrity of the Bahamian financial services industry. The Securities Commission was able to move so quickly because of the strength of the legislative framework, which was already in place in the Bahamas to regulate digital assets companies like FTX Digital Markets. He said that no other jurisdiction in the world moved or could have moved this quickly in circumstances such as these. Pinder said the country stands behind its decision to regulate the digital asset sector and believes that the Bahamas will emerge and be held in even higher esteem. Pinder insisted that any attempt to lay the blame for the company's fall at the feet of the Bahamas is, quote, an oversimplification of reality, unquote. He said that dozens and dozens of companies involved registered in numerous jurisdictions across the world. The scope of related parties, including some of the world's most sophisticated investors, all demonstrate the cross-border, multi-jurisdictional nature of the event. And he said it's deeply misguided. I'm going to quote, I want to reiterate, deeply conclude that reluctance to communicate the details of an active investigation means that nothing is happening. In fact, he added that the government's discretion stems from how seriously the government takes its commitment to the rule of law and the independence of the securities regulator. And remember, we stressed last week that it is in fact a mistake to conflate the actions of the Securities Commission with the government of the Bahamas, because the Securities Commission of the Bahamas is an independent regulator. It is not a government agency. And so any actions taken by the Securities Commission are not by nature, by definition, by any measure, they are not the actions of the government, but the actions of an independent regulator. And that's important to understand if you're going to think about how this story is playing out. Back to what Pinder, in fact, what he said was that the government had been shocked at the ignorance of those who assert that FTX came to the Bahamas because they did not want to submit to regulatory scrutiny. In fact, the world is full of countries in which there is no legislative or regulatory authority over crypto, but the Bahamas is not one of them. Listen, that's the whole purpose. I'm sorry, before I go on with the story, I just need to make this clear. This idea that the Bahamas is the Wild West when it comes to crypto is patently false, wrong, and misguided. I don't generally quote Ryan Pinder verbatim, but it is like severely misguided. That's the whole purpose of the DARE Act, is to provide a regulatory framework for digital assets like cryptocurrency. And according to the Attorney General, those entrepreneurs who are ready to create new financial products that serve abroad are welcome to come to the Bahamas. They can be certain that the Bahamas has in place a principled, fair, comprehensive, and ethical regulatory regime. Pinder added that they can also be certain that the Bahamas will act quickly and decisively to enforce that regime if and when Bahamian laws and regulations are breached, and that they would see that the Bahamas is a place of laws. Now, next in the political review, the view from the other side, while praising Attorney General Ryan Pinder's comprehensive statement on the collapse of FTX, Shadow Minister of Finance Quincy said that the government's response took too long, which caused irreparable damage to the country's reputation. Thompson said the FNM was dismayed that Pinder's admittedly comprehensive address took quite so long to be made. He said the official opposition agrees with the Attorney General that comments on this matter must always be responsible. The leader of the opposition and all members of the opposition, according to Thompson, have always spoken in the country. Thompson said that this was the very reason he issued his statement blasting the government for the time lapse before a statement had been made. He pointed out that the Bahamas' reputation is under attack and insisted that this is a well-regulated and experienced jurisdiction with the best talent in the world, and in the interests of the country, the government must act to protect the industry. Thompson reiterated that FNM leader Michael Pintard had warned the government that by leaving a vacuum, in particular a vacuum in terms of public comment, the country's competitors and enemies would fill it with their narrative. And he asked, where is the communication strategy? According to the Shadow Minister, one statement is not enough. He queried whether the government had engaged an international public relations firm, and also asked why the government hadn't met with the opposition, and more importantly, met with the industry to manage the international message in a nonpartisan way. Finally, on FTX for this week, as his company was being put into liquidation in the Bahamas and before he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the US, Sam Bankman-Fried said he had decided to prioritize Bahamian withdrawals from his cryptocurrency exchange because, and I quote, "You do not want to be in the country with a lot of angry people in it," unquote. In a November 16th interview with Tiffany Fong, a YouTube personality, Bankman-Fried said that he had given the Securities Commission a heads up, a one-day heads up, that he was going to do it. He said that the commission didn't say yes or no, that they didn't respond, and so he went ahead and did what he had to do. And according to him, the reason that he's critical to the exchange being able to have a future, because the Bahamas is where he is, and quote, "You do not want to be in the country with a lot of angry people in it. You do not want your company to be incorporated in a country with a lot of angry people in it." So, and I'm still quoting him, "It was, realistically speaking, shitty, but the pathway forward for FTX involved Bahamians not being pissed with it," unquote. At 4:30 a.m. on November 11th, Bankman-Fried filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and resigned as CEO. He told Fong, as he has said before, that he wishes he had not. The company collapsed following what essentially amounted to a run on the bank. And here's how that went. Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao, who heads the world's largest crypto exchange, tweeted earlier this month, that was earlier in November, that he was pulling out of FTX due to the recent revelations that had come to light. Questions began circling. FTX had properly used customer funds to prop up Alameda Research, which, as we've already said, is a hedge fund owned by Bankman-Fried. And officials said the impact of Zhao's announcement was swift, and that more than $5 billion of withdrawal requests were made to FTX. FTX, of course, was unable to process the requests because it didn't have the money. Officials have said in court documents that there's evidence of fraud and mismanagement at FTX. FTX has over 100 companies in over 20 countries, and it lost between $10 billion and $50 billion, according to court documents. Imagine the scope. So we're going to move away from FTX now for the time being. But obviously, we at the Political Review, as should you, will continue to keep an eye on these developments. I'm very curious about what the results of the interview by local authorities, as announced by the Prime Minister, will bring. And I'm also very interested to hear what Bankman-Fried will say when he testifies before Congress. Remember last month we reported that Sam Bankman-Fried appeared before Congress to report or to explain the collapse of FTX. And I'm sure that questioning is not going to be gentle or pretty. So, yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on it. So let's go to a short break. And when we come back, we'll pick up with the next set of stories that made news, made headlines in the political arena this week here in the wonderful Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so make sure you stay tuned and stick around. We have a great interview coming up at 5 o'clock. I'll tell you more about that a little later. But for now, let's just take a short break, and we'll be right back on the Political Review with K. Quincy Parker. That's me. I'm your host. Bye. See you soon.
Beulah gal, can you believe this? We are now the patrol queens of the neighborhood.
We Dodge, so we need to check out what's going on in everybody's yard. What about that gun that we know that Junior and his homeboys just ran out? Can we report that too?
Of course we can. on.
But we could be in deep trouble if they find out.
We need to report what we see, Beulah. When you call Crime Stoppers, they just answer your call in Miami.
So then we can report everything? Guns, where they hiding the drugs, who shoot who part of which gang, or who disturbing the peace with the loud music and the motorcycles.
Then our neighborhood will be the best in the Bahamas, and everybody gonna want to come live here. And then our house price will go up, gal.
So what we waiting on? What's the number?
If you see something, say something. Let us all pitch in and stop the crime before it's your time. Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands. Or text us through the Crack Crime Bahamas app. Stop the crime before it's your time.
At a time when jobs are hard to find, crime is a concern, and Bahamians are uncertain about the future of the country, there is one paper you can rely on as your source of news and commentary. The Nassau Guardian delves deeper into the issues. We ask the tough questions. We tell your stories. If you haven't already, pick up a copy today. The Nassau Guardian. News and views that matter since 1844.
Love the show? Want to give your support? Become a sponsor today. Call 302-2300 for our rates and packages. That's 302-2300. Become a sponsor on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-date and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM.
Welcome back, folks. You are listening to the Political Review with Quincy Parker, that's me. And today it's the 4th of December. December show for 2022. We're staring down the barrel at Christmas. And I've seen the Christmas spirit being displayed around town. I've seen people with their decorations up at the places of residence and places of work. I've seen the decorations going up around the island. I've heard people already on the Christmas carols, and of course Advent. Is people are already looking forward to Advent and engaged in the Advent process, preparations for it. I wonder what's going to be in the Advent calendar this year. Well, we'll find out, I guess. We'll find out. I hope that you all get the presents you deserve, and that you've been, I hope you've been good, because if you get from Santa Claus, but if you've been good, and you should look forward to Christmas this year. It's 4:30, and you're tuned into the Political Review with Quincy Parker. And here we go back to the Political Review for this week. Our next story in the review concerns the Ukrainian ambassador to the Bahamas, Sergei Kizlytsya, and his expression of high confidence that the Caribbean community will follow up appropriately on a recent United Nations resolution calling for Russia to pay war reparations to Ukraine. CARICOM abstained from voting on the resolution last month. Kizlytsya addressed the abstention while appearing as a guest on Morning Blend with host Dwight Strawn on Guardian Radio 96.9. And the ambassador said that the discussion around compensation and reparations is also about financial issues like tax issues and legality. He said he understood that within CARICOM it's probably a very difficult discussion. And his decision to abstain as a bloc, which is not equal to opposing the resolution, is not as good as Ukraine would have wished, but it is better to some against, some in favor, and some not participating. The ambassador said that the important thing is that 94 countries voted for that resolution, and he had a very high degree of confidence that most of the Caribbean community countries are very dedicated to legality, and that they would follow up, quote unquote, appropriately on the decision of the General Assembly. The General Assembly comprises all 193 member states of the United Nations. And according to the UN, 94 countries voted in favor of the resolution, 14 against, and 73 abstained. The Bahamas government is chair of the CARICOM caucus at the UN, and as such, Stan Smith, the permanent resident of the Bahamas to the United States, to the United Nations, the 14 member states of CARICOM, explaining the bloc's decision to abstain. The Bahamas and other CARICOM members have supported other UN resolutions since Russia began its war on Ukraine earlier this year. His Izlitsia expressed pride for the support Ukraine has received from other countries, including the Bahamas, since the start of the war. He said that the Bahamas' support is, quote unquote, very principled. Next, in this week's political review, Minister of Works and Utilities Alfred Sears says the government is expanding its survey of shanty towns after it determines the next steps, including possible deportation of some residents, to address the long-standing issue of irregular communities in the Bahamas. Irregular communities. That is one very euphemistic way to say it. He said the surveys will have to be expanded because it has come to the government's attention. Excuse me, I need to take a note here. Come to the government's attention that in other islands, aside from the ones initially targeted, which would include Abaco, Eleuthera, and Grand Bahama, that there are communities which are, quote unquote, irregular, where people are squatting on land, and so the scope has had to be expanded. According to Sears, that means more resources in terms of aerial surveys, in terms of persons going in and ascertaining who is in those communities. An interministerial committee has been formed to address the issue of shanty towns, with both Sears and Attorney General Ryan Pinder sitting on the committee. And while noting that the issue is not a recent one, Sears said that preparatory work, said a national survey is needed because the shanty towns exist across the Bahamas. He said that in some areas there is a baseline because when the application to demolish the shanty towns was made in 2019, data was collected on certain areas in New Providence as well as Abaco, and certain subsequent surveys are being compared with that base data so that the government can ascertain the degree of expansion that has taken place since the base data was collected. Sears noted that Bahamians also live in shanty towns. And he questioned how the government would, quote unquote, transition these persons from these irregular communities into proper housing. The minister said that the way forward requires a comprehensive plan and that any action taken would be done in accordance with the law. He added that there would clearly be international implications and communication is being made with multilateral bodies concerned with immigration and resettlement. In 2021, when that's not 2021. Remember, this was when the Free National Movement was still in office. So I believe, yes, this was 2019. The Supreme Court Justice Cheryl Grant Thompson ordered the government to quote unquote cease and desist further demolitions in shantytowns on Abaco and ruled that the government must get approval from a court if it wishes to demolish structures in shantytowns on the island. Shantytown residents, and we talked about this, I think 2 weeks ago when we announced or reported on the announcement of that interministerial committee. Remember, we reported that Shantytown residents had challenged the government's 2018 policy, which sought to get rid of shantytowns in the Bahamas. Implementation of that policy was halted after Grant Thompson issued an injunction banning demolition on New Providence and in parts of Abaco. That injunction was granted in 2019. A substantial ruling has yet, or substantive, I believe that word should be, ruling has not yet been made, and as a result, the injunction remains in place. Next, in this week's review, the Minister of National Security, Wayne Monroe, said that the government hopes to start construction of a new prison facility by January 15th, 2023. Monroe acknowledged that it was an ambitious goal. He said that his team at the Ministry of National Security aims to do what is necessary to accomplish goals that are set out. The new facility was announced earlier this year. It will house 820 inmates and will 820 inmates and will include a special unit for mentally ill patients. Acting Commissioner of Corrections, Doan Clear, said it would be a contained, air-conditioned facility. Upon completion, the new facility would be one of 3 facilities left open on the compound. The others would be the removal facility. Claire said that the idea is to close down medium security, female prison, and the minimum security prison, and for the new facility to be co-ed. Monroe initially estimated that the facility would cost between $35 million and $40 million. However, he indicated this last week that officials were still working out a final cost for the development. Work on a juvenile facility is also underway at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services, and according to the commissioner, the estimated completion date for that work is the 16th of December this year. Meanwhile, in a related piece, we read or saw once again what conditions are like at the prison right now. The cells in the remand center at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services are cramped. There's no lighting in the cells. When the press toured the facility this week with Wayne Monroe and Dawn Clear. Some cells had 3 or 4 inmates and others had as many as 10. Inmates looked on as the delegation, which included prison and Ministry of National Security officials, passed through the narrow hallways, some sitting on the floor while others watched from lower bunks of beds or sitting on buckets. Most of the remand center appeared to be in a state of disrepair, and renovations were ongoing on the remaining part. The commissioner said that renovations at the remand center so far cost $84,000 and were expected to cost roughly $2 million in total. He said that a pharmacy would also be added to the facility within the next 2 weeks. We're going to have to talk about the expectations for the prison and the point of. I'm not certain that a prison built to house 820 inmates is sufficient. I'm going to try and get Wayne Monroe on the show as soon as I can to answer some questions about what went into the decision that resulted in a choice of a facility of that size when the current population at the prison, if I recall, is between 2,000 and 3,000. So I stand to be corrected on that number, but it just seems like building a prison for 820 people doesn't seem sufficient. So we'll try to get an interview with Wayne Monroe to have that discussion as soon as we can. Moving on, SuperValue owner Rupert Roberts said on Friday of this week that with the holidays approaching, the price of popular holiday goods will remain consistent to the prices currently reflected in stores. Don't expect any discounts, in other words. Roberts, the owner of the largest grocery store chain in the country, spoke with the press this week about, and he said that the company has already purchased Christmas inventory, which means that the prices of popular Christmas food items like ham and turkey will reflect that of the Thanksgiving prices. And Roberts further noted there might be a delay on weekly produce due to inclement weather and a lack of quality. With the inflation of grocery prices and higher daily living expenses, Roberts acknowledged the quote-unquote terrible increases, noting that the price increase of items such as cooking oil, mayonnaise, eggs, and lettuce. Okay, so here Roberts said that the price of mayonnaise has gone up 150%. Eggs, the price of eggs is at an all-time high. It's the highest Rupert Roberts has ever seen them in his own history in the business. And of course, cooking oil is also at an all-time high. Keep these things in mind when you hear the discussion about price control and how effective it is on keeping costs down. That's all I'll say. I'll leave that alone right there. Moving on to politics and labor in this week's review, union leaders this week called on the Davis administration to stop its quote-unquote union-busting tactics, calling the government's recent announcement about forthcoming salary increases for public servants that were reportedly made without consultation a quote, blatant disregard for unions, unquote. The Bahamas Public Service Union office on East Street and Soldier Road, union leaders responded to the government's announcement in a memorandum and a proposal document last Friday with proposed salary increases for public servants. The proposal included changes to initial increases proposed by the Bahamas Public Services Union. And then on Tuesday of last week, Bernard Evans, does that name sound familiar? Was the chief labor consultant in charge of the negotiations between the BPSU and the government, keeping in mind that Bernard Evans is a former union president himself. Anyway, he said that the negotiations should be satisfied by the end of the week, pointing to a rise in minimum wage for the recent revision of the proposed wage increases to public servants. In response to this, BPSU President Kimsley Ferguson said this week that the recently changed proposed salary increases and proposed increase in allowances for various categories of public servants that were sent out to governing officials for quote-unquote implementation was done without the voice of his union. He insisted that the umbrella union, and that is the BPSU, has not met he insisted that the BPSU has not met with the government to sign off on any particular item in the industrial agreement. He added that increases regarding the responsibility allowance are not something that the Bahamas Public Service Union would be signing off on. He also disclosed that the annual increases that are being put in place for permanent secretaries, directors, and department heads exceed the salaries of minimum wage public servants, and argued that this shows nothing to allow public servants adequate increases. Ferguson said that he'd received nothing in the form of a counterproposal and added that it appears as if there's some scrambling taking place for persons to try to save face. He explained that while the agreement was presented in 2018, there were some non-financial aspects of the agreement that had been signed off on. But meanwhile, there are a number of other financial issues that needed to be discussed and agreed upon. He said the union had yet to be given the opportunity to do so. Melinda Wilson, who is president of the Bahamas National Alliance Trade Union Congress, a newly formed umbrella union, and also president of the Bahamas Union of Teachers, was also at the press conference. And she said that all the unions that fall within the BNATUC umbrella organization would stand with the BPSU to ensure that they are treated fairly, calling on the government to follow its own labor laws. Wilson declared that the Congress has a with the employer, and more specifically the government, does not follow the labor laws. She said that while the Congress would not stand in the way of employer paying funds to employee, the Congress would not ignore the blatant disregard for unions, and in this instance, the Public Service Union, particularly since the government is aware of the right to collective bargaining and that the BPSU is the sole bargaining agent for public service workers throughout the Bahamas. She called on the Minister of Labor to tell his colleagues to cease and desist from the breaches of the Industrial, Relations Act and to get to the negotiating table with the BPSU forthwith. Teresa Mortimer, who is the Secretary General of the Congress, said that the government of the Bahamas is engaged in union busting, and that when the government is union busting, one can expect nothing less from the private sector. The Congress is comprised of 6 unions and 2 associations. Present along with Wilson, Ferguson, and Mortimer at the press conference were representatives of the Bahamas Taxicab Union and the Airport, Airline, and Allied Workers Union. In a related story, Labor and Immigration Minister Keith Bell this week said that he's not concerned with the quote-unquote rhetoric being spread about union negotiations for public service salary increases, adding that he hopes for a quote-unquote an amicable resolution. Bell made those comments at the side of the on Gladstone Road. His comments were in response to union leaders from the Congress calling for the government to consult with the Bahamas Public Services Union about any changes to increases in salaries for public servants in advance of implementation. Bell has said that his ministry is satisfied with where the negotiations currently are between the government and the BPSU, and he says that the government is ready to come to an agreement. Now, this next story is, I don't know if it's really labor related, but it is very politically charged. So Free National Movement Vice Chairman Richard Johnson, this one is outright blatant politics. F&M Vice Chairman Richard Johnson has taken legal action against party leaders Michael Pintard and Dr. Dwayne Sands after being banned from attending future party's constitution. According to a writ of summons filed on November 28th, Mr. Johnson, represented by attorney Greg Moss, is seeking $500,000 in compensation for general or exemplary damages concerning the suspension, which stems from allegations that he, quote, acted contrary to the interests of the party, its platform, and policies. FNM leader and FNM chairman, FNM leader Pintard and FNM chairman Sands are defendants in the action, which again, This man is suing for $500 million. $500 million. He's suing for $500 million. Excuse me, $500,000. That's not overstated. I apologize for that. $500,000 in damages. So I apologize, Johnson. You're not for $500 million. You're suing for $500,000 in damages over not being able to attend FNM council meetings. The writ notes to Dr. Sands, and I'm sorry, guys, not reading any more of that stuff. That's enough for you to know that Richard Johnson is suing the FNM for $500,000. And finally, in this week's review, the government this week signed 2 conventions concerning progress for persons with disabilities and gender-based violence, and also launched a phase of the National Child Labor Policy. If we had a soundtrack with applause, here is where we would be playing it. The Department of Labor, in conjunction with the National Tripartite Council and the International Labor Organization, held a symposium for those events this week at the National Training Agency. Bell, Labor and Immigration Minister Keith Bell, was at the symposium, and he said that it's the 3rd Caribbean country to ratify and implement the ILO Convention 190 and put an end to violence and harassment in the world of work. The government of the Bahamas publicly commits to both recognize the right of everyone in the world of work free from violence and harassment, including gender-based violence and harassment, and to recognizing that violence and harassment in the world of work can constitute a human rights violation or abuse. And that violence, harassment are threats to equal opportunities and are unacceptable and incompatible with decent work. Finally, according to Bell, the government also commits to recognize the importance of a work culture based on mutual respect and dignity of the human being to prevent violence and harassment. Bell added that the Bahamas is also ratifying ILO Convention 159, which is the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Disabled Persons Convention. The National Tripartite Council recommendation to ratify ILO 159 is a public acknowledgement of the importance that the administration places on the disabled community in our nation. That's what Keith Bell said. I will reserve judgment until I see how Convention 159 rolls out. About the need for creation of accessibility in public spaces. And this is a national commitment on behalf of the government. And I want to see just how this administration responds to having ratified this convention. I have hope, but we got to see. I'm gonna skip that and say that concludes this week's review of major stories from the week in politics. And we may have to skip under the radar this week because we have our interview coming up at 5 o'clock. But, oh man, we're gonna go to a break really shortly. I'll just hit the highest highlights of the 2 stories that went under the radar this week. First, Bahamian regulators, in this instance, the Compliance Commission, which supervises non-financial services institutions over their compliance with anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing laws, issued warnings to 127 law and real estate firms over non-compliance with those anti-financial crime mandates over the course of the year, while also giving the Bahamas' $306 million real estate sales clean bill of health. Neil Hartnell wrote a great story on this in this week's Tribune. I would encourage you to find it and read it. It's worth paying attention to, particularly because high-end real estate is known as a potential area for misuse by money launderers and terrorist financiers around the world. Real estate is often chosen globally as a vehicle for criminals to launder ill-gotten gains because property offers a path to legitimacy and would also appreciate over time. And so that would allow criminals to enjoy their property and eventually the proceeds of sale. So this is something that a country like the Bahamas would have to really pay attention to. The other story under the radar this week is also from Neil Hartnell. It concerns the $75 million October deficit racked up by the government after it was revealed that monthly spending on goods and services more than doubled to drive a 24.5% year-over-year recurrent spending increase, with no real explanation as to why those expenses double. It's your money they're spending, so I would encourage you to pay very close attention to it. Go and find the story in the Tribune. You can find it on the Tribune online and read it because you need to be paying attention. All right, so Chris, let's go ahead and take that break, and when we come back, we'll have our interview at 5 on the Political Review with Quincy Parker. We'll be right back.
I used to think of the bank as my personal ATM machine. If I wanted a new car, new furniture, a weekend trip to Miami, no problem, just max out the credit card or top up my loan. I was a big baller until I realized that 75% of my salary was going to pay back all those loans. Fidelity's Personal was the best solution. Fidelity gave me a plan with a debt consolidation loan that has a built-in savings that pays 5% interest. I now only have one low monthly payment plus money in my pocket. Give Fidelity Bank a call at 356-7764 in Nassau or 352-6676 in Freeport. Visit any of Fidelity's locations or visit a website at fidelitygroup.com.
Love the show? Want to give your support? Become a sponsor today. Call 302-2300 for our rates and packages. That's 302-2300. Become a sponsor on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Political Review with Quincy Parker. That's me. I'm your host, and I'm excited to be of December, the year of our Lord
2022. And as I've been saying this whole show, I still can't believe it's December. Christmas is around the corner. What is it the song says? Christmas is a-coming and the geese are getting fat. Please put a penny in the old man's hat. Well, the old man's hat needs some pennies for sure if the old man is the bomb. Today we've parsed through what is the current status with the FTX saga. We looked at some developments in the political arena that touch on labor and also on child labor in particular, and with regard to gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace as well. And it's been, as I said, it was an interesting week in politics this week. We also talked about Richard Johnson suing the F&M for $500,000, which, because that is a matter that I suppose is technically before the courts, we won't say much about that, but there's definitely a story there, whatever it is. And we will try through our channels to get at whatever that story is, and we'll try and be able to tell you as soon as we can. But at the moment, at 3 minutes after 5, I would like to turn from our review of politics this week to a discussion that I'm looking forward to with the chairman of the movement, Dr. Dwayne Sands, who joins us now live. Dr. Sands, welcome back to the Political Review.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and you're right. Christmas soon reach.
Yeah. I hope you've been a good boy, Dr. Sands. I hope Santa has you on the nice list.
My brother, I don't know the demographics of your listening audience, but I am Santa. So, and I'm sure there are a lot of parents that understand what I mean. So,
yes.
I'm on the other side of the equation. But it's all good, and certainly this time of the year is a wonderful time to reflect, to consider all of the blessings. We have completed the hurricane season, and with just some minor issues from Nicole, I think the Bahamas has now had 2 successive years, I guess 3 successive years without any major drama post-Dorian. So we've got a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah, I agree thoroughly. Isaias was a bit of a blip in 20. I think Isaias was in 2020, and then Nicole really didn't do much, thank God, here last month. So we've more or less, as you say, we've been blessed, and that is cause for thanks. Dr. Sands, you have taken the Minister of Public Works to task with regard to goings on tour over the last week. I wanted to ask you about that. I also wanted to put to you this question of the interministerial committee on shantytowns and the fact that we still have yet to really have a substantive ruling from the Supreme Court on the way forward with regard to dealing with shantytowns based on the policy enunciated by the Minnis administration when it held the government to get rid of shantytowns in the Bahamas. The Davis administration seems determined to continue along that path and get rid of shantytowns, but it seems that the courts are fettering what action can be taken. So I make that statement, which it includes a couple of questions, and I'd like for you to begin our conversation with that in mind.
So let's look at the water situation in Eleuthera. I would have seen commentary suggesting that the salinity of the water that now traverses the public water system is orders of magnitude higher than any acceptable standard, with levels of salinity as high as greater than 4,000 parts per million. That they have had some challenges with providing potable water to residents from the north all the way to the south. But, you know, there does not seem to be any degree of urgency to resolve this matter, where people can't bathe, they're missing school, they're missing work, they can hardly flush the toilets. For some people, they rely on public water even for drinking and cooking. And so you ask the question, where are the priorities? We watch, and you said in your first segment that the government's recurrent expenditure has skyrocketed. But skyrocketed on what? It has skyrocketed, obviously, on travel. It's skyrocketed on entertainment. But on basic needs, where people find themselves in great difficulty, that they can't even get water, they certainly have not spent anywhere near an acceptable level. We hopefully will talk a little bit about the state of roads, particularly in New Providence, but around the country. And it has become no longer laughable when you see the size, the number, the depth of the potholes around almost every single major thoroughfare in New Providence, but in other places.
Well,
it's
on the sorry.
So
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You asked the question, if a government cannot provide basic services, keep the lights on, keep the roads passable, keep people safe, then what are they there for?
When did I ask that question, Dr. Sam?
No, I'm saying that ordinary human beings would be asking that question. So it's a somewhat rhetorical question that I'm posing to you and to your listening audience.
I just wanted that to be clear. Thank you.
So, you know, it's an unfortunate reality that we live in a Bahamas where this government has forecasted the single highest, greatest public expenditure in the history of the Bahamas, with basic essential services are not being provided. And now this then brings us to the question of the day, and that is the situation with the unregulated housing communities. We would have been stopped, constrained, restrained by the courts when efforts were made to address what was a burgeoning but real problem, a safety hazard throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I speak of unregulated communities, which were fire hazards, which were health hazards, which were electrical hazards, and we could go on and on and on. We thought that notwithstanding some people's willingness to try to conflate issues of immigration and so on and so forth with unsafe housing, that this was a matter that needed to be dealt with. You know what happened to us. We were not allowed to proceed. This administration seems to be like a deer in the headlights, unable to move at all. And we are watching the explosive growth of unregulated communities, not just in Abaco, but throughout the Bahamas. And they're paying it lip service and doing precious little other than paying it lip service.
There's a question that comes up out of something that you said earlier in terms of the projected spending, but I'll come back to that. Given that the courts have issued an injunction and basically tied the government's hands with regards to the demolition of these structures, what avenue is left open to the administration to move forward with dealing with shantytowns?
Well, I believe that the injunction specifically referred to those structures that were already in place, and that there was no provision allowance for new structures to be created or new communities to be built. Bear in mind that the current legislation for subdivisions requires that certain. So as you watch these, and I will use this word guardedly and advisedly, subdivisions being built up with tens, if not hundreds of homes, then clearly, based on anybody's interpretation of the existing Supreme Court ruling by Cheryl Grant Bethel, these things are ultra vires even that ruling. And yet this administration has stood by and just watched it happen. A lot of talk, absolutely no action. At the same time, we have seen this same government take a draconian, aggressive, vindictive approach to legal structures, government-owned structures, being occupied primarily by Bahamians, and ripped them down. Came in with bulldozers, etc., and tore them down. And so you ask, what is the standard that allows this administration to destroy housing complexes occupied by residents and citizens, but to be paralyzed with these unregulated housing communities occupied by some residents and citizens, but also occupied by other persons?
It is clear you are suggesting, and forgive me if I put words in your mouth, but I want to clarify what I'm hearing. You're suggesting that the administration is guilty of having some kind of a double standard with regard to how it approaches these matters.
I think the thing speaks for itself, and we look at what has happened over the last, I guess it would be 14 months, maybe 15 months now, and there's clearly a double standard.
That is, but that would seem counterproductive, Dr. Sands.
I agree. I think that people have been looking on and this was a WTF moment for Bahamians, asking why the urgency to destroy housing structures on an island where housing is scant, where it is almost impossible to provide enough housing for the persons that are needed to support education, immigration, technology, etc. I speak of Abaco. Without any regard to how and when you are going to have adequate housing to place people, because there's still people living in trailers in Abaco right now. And yet, as these other communities expand and proliferate, the government has stuck its head proverbially in the sand and said, oh, we can't do anything about this.
And you think that we heard what the Minister of Public Works said, they're doing surveys to map out the extent to which these illegal communities exist across the country. You don't think that that is a worthy or acceptable action or use of the government's time?
I think it's another stalling tactic. We have enough studies. We have sat back and watched as this powder keg has gotten bigger and as the fuse has gotten shorter. There's so many issues related to this particular matter. And unfortunately, I think this dovetails or segues nicely into the question of the fitness of this particular minister to function as a minister. I think his challenges in this arena, his challenges as it relates to the BPL fuel hedging fiasco, it makes it fairly clear that as senior as he is, and I love the man. I think he's an incredible Bahamian. He has just not acquitted himself adequately, and he has committed some cardinal sins as a minister. And I think it is time for him either to leave or to be directed to leave.
I'm sorry. I want to be clear. You are talking about Alfred Sayers.
I am talking about Alfred Sayers, the Minister of Public Works, and the sentinel event that drives that statement is, I believe we have unequivocal evidence based on his utterances on his feet in the House of Assembly on not one, but multiple occasions, that he has misled the Parliament and he has misled the people of the Bahamas as to what he knew, when he knew it, if he knew it, regarding instructions from various advisors to lock in savings for the Bahamian people for the fuel hedging program. The back and forth between the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Works was nothing short of a circus when they were quibbling over whether it was the Minister of Finance that knew or the Ministry of Finance that knew. What is clear is that the Minister of Public Works admitted that he had been apprised of the option to protect the interests of Bahamian people by locking into lower rates for fuel, and that on the basis of either an opinion or a view expressed by the Minister of Finance, that BPL did not do so. And I believe this month's electrical bill and next month's electrical bill and predicted increase by as much as 163% is a direct consequence of an act of omission by this minister. Now, had he had the ministerial integrity to say, look, we knew, we made a decision, it in retrospect was not the best decision, I think people would be somewhat forgiving. But I believe that the minister misled public, misled the parliament. And in our Westminster system, that is a cardinal, unforgivable sin.
As I read it, and I hear your view, and I do not, I won't castigate you for it, but I just want to be clear that what I heard the minister say was that he made a statement on his feet in October. Subsequently, he went and did some research and found out that there had been a communication vis-a-vis the ground, and that any statements that he made prior to doing that research, I think would have been made in without the benefit of all the facts. And that's what I heard him say when he got up on his feet to confirm that, yes, there was a document proposing that the hedge be executed, and that what was it was gone, if there was an increase, it would have been from 10.5 cents to 11.5 cents, I believe was the exact number. But I don't know that I'm reading that as deliberately misleading the House.
You know, the issue is not whether you deliberately mislead. You know, it is whether you mislead. And the role of government, if you cannot trust the communications coming from the cabinet of the Bahamas, then who can you trust? And so you may recall that the leader of the opposition, Michael Pintard, repeatedly asked the question, did you have advice? Were you counseled? And these are my words now, okay? Did you get a report? And the answer from both the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister and the Minister was repeatedly no. And those answers were given on their feet. Subsequently, when the documents were about to make their way into the public domain, the Minister of Public Works would have said, yes, there was a cabinet paper and it made some recommendations, and the Minister of Finance didn't agree with it. And so we didn't go with it. Well, that then ought to trigger an apology, and I'm not sure that the apology cures the problem. But I have listened, and there has been no apology. There's been no apology from the Minister of Public Works, and there's been no apology from the Minister of Finance. And so the position of the Free National Movement as of the 4th of December 2022 is that the people of the Bahamas, the Parliament of the Bahamas, should do the honorable thing and resign.
All right. There it is. I'm gonna probably come back to that in a little while, but I want to get through my list of questions for you before I expand over much on any of them. So we've talked about the water thing in Eleuthera. I wanted to come back to the road situation, and you will recall the political price that Hubert Ingram and the FNM paid for the New Providence Road Improvement Project. I mean, Jose Cordelone is still considered a bad word in this country, right? There was a whole song written by Gino D. The roads then dig up, dig up. I noticed that Gino hasn't written a new song.
Unfortunately, we all found ourselves, dancing and singing to that song, even though that scenario played a critical role in the outcome of the 2012 general election.
My question, though, is: given the state of, I really want to underline that I think it is very interesting that Gino has not written a new song about how dig up the roads are, and I have questions about why that might be, but I'll leave that there. Is it not time for something similar to be done? Isn't it time for a major road improvement project, given the state of roads around the country, given the importance of the transportation of goods and services and just people getting from point A to point B, given the damage that is happening to cars, well, to vehicles around the country through traversing these roads that are bitten up, uneven, poorly constructed, roads that are flooded out, roads that have suffered water damage, and isn't it time for a major road project around the country?
Well, I mean, we have seen a major road project. That was a signature program in the last administration. If you look at bridge work, road work in Andros, in Abaco, in Long Island, other places, certainly we have seen significant ongoing roadworks. Nassau Street was paved. You had other major thoroughfares that had their own intervention. So the issue is, the budget of the Ministry of Public Works, ought there not be a consistent maintenance program with scheduled capital works throughout the year? What I find most disconcerting is this administration has these pie-in-the-sky ideas about capital works. So we can build 2 new hospitals, one in Nassau and one in Grand Bahama. We can build a new prison, and we can do this and we can do that. But you can't fill in the doggone holes on the road. And some of these roads, there's some axle bending, frame shattering potholes. Somebody I heard described that say, when you hit some of these holes, the station on your radio has changed. Your lights has come on. And while that may be funny, I think we have seen, and I gotta choose my language very carefully, a number of serious injuries where potholes have played a critical role in the outcome on some of these patients. And so you ask the question, why is it that there seems to be no adequate ongoing maintenance, irrespective of the major capital works. Because some of these roads, if you talk about a major artery, widening Gladstone Road, for instance, that's a big, big project, eh? So that's not something that you're going to just pick up one day and do. But you ought to be able to keep the number of potholes that are proliferating all over the place at a reasonable level. And there ought to be the feeling in the public that somehow somebody actually cares about my tire, my rim, my life, by dealing with these massive holes. You know, somebody sent around this meme the other day, if the Titanic was filmed in the Bahamas and they had two people swimming in a pothole. But that's how bad it is. And this is no exaggeration. So we found the same situation in North Abaco when we visited 3 weeks ago. Horrible. The state of the roads is deplorable. And if you are talking about spending historic levels of money, and you could afford to go wherever you want to go, then why is this not a priority?
I think that is the question that I think most of us who are paying attention have, right? I mean, a government, the whole point of a general election is that you choose a group of people who you want to empower to do business on your behalf, because you believe that they have your best interests at heart, whether that is on a very personal one-to-one level, you think you can get a contract, or your cousin can get a job, or whether it's some principled choice that you make, you buy the party's platform and you believe country and you than the other people. But the reality, separate and apart from philosophy and separate and apart from what you personally stand to gain, is that the Davis administration is making choices that demonstrate a set of priorities for how they spend money, that those priorities seem to be at odds with what they say their priorities are. Because
exactly.
for me,
when you look, see, we look at little things.
Wait,
like
I'm sorry,
urgence. Pardon me?
Yeah, Dr. I'm sorry. Chris is saying we need to take a break. So
okay.
Let's stick a pin there, and we'll come right back, and we'll pick up right there when we come back on the other side of this break. Okay?
No problems.
Thank you, sir. We'll take a short break here on the Political Review with K. Quincy Parker, and we'll be right back.
Have you taken a look at those investment options yet?
Too busy. Look at today. Workout, breakfast, drop kids at school, back-to-back meetings, dog from the groomer, nails. And that's all before 12. How come you're so chill?
That's because my money is as busy as you.
At RF, we find the best Bahamian and international investments to keep your money busy so you can spend more time focusing on you. Contact us at rfgroup.com to find out more. RF, money at work.
1 in every 4 people in the Bahamas face some level of food insecurity. Program. AML Foods remains steadfast in our commitment to help those struggling with hunger and will donate $5,000 to provide holiday meals to families this Christmas. But we need your help. From November 14th to December 19th, show your support and donate at the register at any Solomon's, Costrite, Solomon's Fresh Market, Exuma Markets, or Domino's locations in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Exuma. Together, let's put an end to hunger.
Love the show? Want to give your support? Become a sponsor today. Call 302-2300 for our rates and packages. That's 302-2300. Become a sponsor on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM.
Thank you for sticking around and spending your Sunday afternoon with us here on the Political Review. My name is Quincy Parker. I'm your host. It's my pleasure to be with you another 20 minutes or so with our special guest today, Dr. Dwayne Sands, the chairman of the Free National Movement. And we left off talking about priority. And the fact that, well, my opinion, that the way the government is spending is at odds with what they say their priorities might be. It's one thing to say that you want to wipe the tear from every eye, which is that is the traditional Progressive Liberal Party party line. But the fact that major public good, things like fixing roads, goes undone when you're spending millions on travel. And I'm not suggesting for a second that they shouldn't travel. Obviously, travel is critically important. But it's only important in light of the agenda laid out by the Prime Minister. He could very easily have prioritized something else, which would mean that spending on travel would not be necessary to support whatever Prime Minister Davis's agenda would be. We only need to spend this much money on travel because he's prioritized going out to try to sell the world on carbon credits. The spending for the financial services sector has traditionally been done by the sector. The spending been done by the sector. The government may subsidize or may add on, but this level, anyway, I don't want it to seem like I'm slamming them for traveling. But my only point is, in fact, to me, the state of the roads is an indictment of the administration, because you could be spending money to fix those roads. And I think that would be a much more tangible way of showing people what you're about than talking about a carbon credit that people, number one, don't understand, and number two, have questions about just how it's going to work to magically finance this record level of public spending that you intend to do. Hundreds of millions of dollars will go into the construction of new hospitals and New Providence. The prison is going to, I'm going to talk to Dr. Sands about it in a minute. The new prison is going to cost almost, I bet at the end of the day, it'll cost close to $100 million. I mean, I know they've said between 35 and 40, but even Wayne Monroe says that the people at his ministry are really working to figure out what it's really going to cost. And I think that 35 to $40 million is low. But even if it isn't low, where are they going to get that money from? Given that they continue to cry anyway. So it just seems like this government has a set of priorities that needs to be readdressed. Dr. Sands, that's my view. What is yours?
Amen. 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 You know, it's all well and good to have incredible aspirational ideas for the advancement of the country. I think that's very, very important. There is no question that we need a new prison. There's no question that our healthcare infrastructure, particularly at our flagship hospital, is still in significant need. There's no question that we have other major capital works that need to be done. I was on Green Turtle Key the other day, and they need a dock, and so on and so forth. But, you know, basic maintenance trumps a lot of that stuff. And when you're talking about capital works, which will take 5 to 10 years, what you can tell people, well, you know, just see what you could do. Function like the people in South Andrews have done for the last 40 years and drive around the lakes in the road, and we could see what we could do eventually. Or, you know, keep going to the well to get some water, because we're not going to provide you with potable water because your island is not a priority. It's the age-old concept of economics, guns and butter. You cannot get it all. And what people would like to know is that the lights are on, that they are safe, that they have water, that basic the garbage is being collected. Okay, and then now that the schools, so their children can be educated. And then everything else that you could do on top of that, well, that's gravy. And we'd like to see you do some things on top of that. But if you can tell me that, well, we don't know when your garbage can be collected, and I can have rats running around my yard and in my house, and that the roads are a danger for the motoring public, then as far as I'm concerned, all of your bright ideas about you can build this and you can build that, these are white elephants to your own ego, monuments to your ego. And you really don't care about my life. And that's where this administration is right now. The disconnect is palpable. It is absent in Eleuthera, where the young people in Eleuthera are now asking, look, can we get some water so we could bathe to go to school? How much more fundamental does it get than that? Anyway.
I want to leave. I want that statement to sit for a minute, because I don't think people understand that it's that desperate in some places, especially not here in Nassau.
It is that desperate. It is that desperate where, you know, people have heard excuse after excuse. Oh, we can see what we can do. And now the government's approach is to give out 5-gallon water bottles periodically to say, here, this is all we can do right now. But the water that you get in your pipe is at 4,000 parts per million salinity. And the upper limit of acceptable is 270. Now, we saw that in Grand Bahama after Dorian, when the aquifers were contaminated with seawater. But over time, and with the efforts of the Grand Bahama Authority, they managed to get the salinity out of the water. But that was an intentional, deliberate, programmatic approach. You don't see that in places like Eleuthera and Ahmed Bai, San Salvador.
All right. So we're gonna leave that there for the prison. And my question isn't whether there's a need for a new prison. I think that's been the position since I started reporting on politics in the 1990s, right? The early 1990s. The question I have is, we go into the trouble of building a new prison. Why build it to only house 820 inmates when there are thousands of people currently packed into the facility that was built to hold 700? It just seems like we are building something that is going to be redundant the minute you break ground on it. Once you cut the ribbon and say this place is open for business, it's already going to be full. And you're going to need to expand again. Am I missing something?
Well, I think this is where so-called compromise has crept in. So you come up with something that isn't going to be adequate, but you then pat yourself on the back and say, but we did something. And, you know, it really gets down to what priority is important for an administration whose the primacy of their politics, or the primacy of doing something that is going to, and don't get me wrong, the role of a political organization is to get elected, right? But when you are the government now, you ought to be making decisions that are in the best interest of the people that you've been elected to serve. And there's this obligatory tension or conflict between what is right for you to be doing as a cabinet and what is right for you to guarantee re-election as a government. And bear in mind that we have learned over the last 25 years that no matter what you do, there's no guarantee you can get re-elected anyway. Because the last time anybody was re-elected was 97, eh? So you may as well do the right thing, because ain't no guarantee that if you do what you think is going to curry favor with the public, that they ain't gonna roll you out anyway. So back to the prison. We have allowed the physical plant of the prison to deteriorate to an unacceptable level. Our challenge is not the what, it is the how. How are you going to build an adequate 2022 to 2052 purpose-built prison and pay for it? Now, we know what we want, but we ain't prepared to pay for it. Okay? Not and have the money to give jobs to the party faithful and travel, discretionary spending and so on and so forth. Because if we were to hypothecate the money necessary to build the prison, then we can't do what we want to do. And now I don't have the ability to reward the people that I want to reward. So we end up doing something that is, little piece, so that we could get it done, so we could open it by time as we go and getting ready to go to election, and say, here, I did this for you.
So let me put to you some numbers. At December 30th, 2020, the number of people in the prison was 1,617. I haven't been able to find it. I'm still looking. Let's take the 2020 number, 1,617. Let's round that down to 1,600. The people on remand, that is pre-trial detainees at the prison, was that, as again at December 2020, was 37%. That's about 590 people. So if you remove the remand population, you are still left with over 1,000 people who are in the prison actually serving prison sentences. And you are planning to build a prison that is short of that number by more than 80 people? I don't understand. I don't understand how you could plan to build a very short of the prison population that already exists.
Well, what it may mean is that we segregate the goals, and it might be that we build a remand facility separate and apart from the main prison, and that's a standalone project. You may want to then do a women's prison as a standalone project. You may want to look at, and this is one thing that I thought would have been a brilliant idea, providing improved medical services at the prison, inclusive of basic X-ray and lab facilities, which would not cost a whole heck of a lot, so that you are not shuttling inmates back and forth downtown through the that bus that we all got to get off the road for.
Yes, absolutely.
And which costs an incredible amount of money, given the security required, the personnel required, etc., just to get somebody to go downtown to take a chest X-ray.
Yeah,
so
I've said that I'm. Sorry, I've said I want to get Wayne on the show to answer some questions about the prison. I only got 4 minutes left, Dr. Sand, so I want to ask my last two questions real quick.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask you to stick a pin in the prison thing.
No problem.
The concerns FNM politics. This is the political review. You are the party chairman. I have to ask. Somebody asked me last night. I don't know why they think I would know, but they say, Parker, I hear Minnis still trying to run for leader. So I put the question to you directly. Is there any indication that Dr. Minnis is preparing to challenge Mr. Pintard for the leadership of the party?
There are certainly no substantive signals that is the case. What I can say is that the existing leadership of the Free National Movement, headed by Michael Pintard, has been working aggressively to demonstrate that we have the interests of the Bahamian people at heart, and that we are focused on dealing with some of the problems that Bahamians have, and we are not minded either to deal with this story that people find interesting and sexy, the other story that yearning for oxygen, and Vice Chairman Jay.
I mean, I gotta ask you, Brother Johnson. As I said before I put it up, I know it's before the court, so you can't say much.
whether it's before the court or not before the court, it doesn't deserve the time and attention. The Bahamian people are not interested in nonsense. Okay? What they are interested in is, as an organization, are you willing to keep this administration's feet to the fire? Are you prepared to be His Majesty's loyal opposition to the best of your ability and to raise the questions like the Alfred Sayers issue, to raise the issue about Bermuda Gate and whether the PLP abused their office and spent public funds on a political junket? These are the kinds of things that Bahamian people want to know that the FNM is doing, not this other nonsense. So it doesn't rise to the level of spending any of your valuable 2 minutes or 30 seconds that you have left on your show.
Good. Fair enough. I've put out questions. As I say, I'm trying to get Wayne Monroe on to talk about the prison. I'm also trying to get Mike Darville on to discuss the mental health. And I really would like to talk to you about that one of these days soon, because I think that that bill is very important.
On doing it some of the time.
Yeah. So the next go round, I will. That'll be the subject of our discussion. I'll try and have you. If I have the High Commissioner on next week, or week after next. So maybe in the new year, you and I can have a chat about the mental health bill and mental health in the Bahamas.
Governments are continuous, eh? And while I applaud this minister for bringing this bill to the table, I'm looking forward to him giving credit to all the persons involved in doing the background work that made it possible. And I'll say no more.
Thank you, Dr. Sands, for your candor and your thoughts and presence here on the Political Review. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you, and I appreciate the invitation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, sir. And Merry Christmas, by the way.
And to you and to your listening audience. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Up next on Guardian Talk with Lady T. May God bless you and keep you. And all you married gentlemen, God rest you as well. All right, Chris, great job as usual. Thanks. See you folks next week. Bye-bye.